Hi, this is Dr. Karen Wilson Starks, your host for The Voice of Leadership, the show for business executives and global corporations who appreciate a biblical perspective on life and leadership. You are listening to our Fab 500 series featuring some of the best of our 500 episodes and celebrating the 30th year of Trans Leadership Inc. We live in a world where there is increasing polarization in executive leadership, whether in politics, schools, or business. The art of working together across aisles and divides has diminished, and as a result, we have incivility in government, corporations, the media, and war between nations. How do we bridge these chasms and create the kind of leadership that is positive and gets results that everyday people want to see? I'm Dr. Karen Wilson Starks, your host for the Voice of Leadership and for Dr. Karen Speaks Leadership. Today's guest has served in both municipal government and executive business leadership roles. He says that extremist leadership is unsustainable and there is a better and more hope-filled way forward. My guest, Deke Copenhaver, served as mayor of Augusta, Georgia from 2005 through 2014. As mayor, he helped recruit over $1 billion in investment in the local economy and created thousands of jobs by bringing in major employers such as automatic data processing, T-Mobile, Starbucks, and Unisys. In 2013, during his tenure as mayor, Augusta's Laney Walker Bethlehem Revitalization Initiative received the Housing and Urban Development Secretary's Opportunity and Empowerment Award. Deke's results as mayor were accomplished through a 9-year focus on building a diverse, inclusive, strong, positive culture within the municipal government and the city as a whole. He led a comprehensive approach built on the strength of Augusta's diverse labor force and focused on economic development and neighborhood revitalization. The result was significant growth in the local economy, along with growth in Augusta's population. Now, as principal of Copenhaver Consulting LLC, a niche consulting firm in Augusta, Georgia, Deke serves the needs of businesses, nonprofits, and local governments. He's also the author of the Forbes Books Amazon #1 bestseller, The Change Maker: The Art of Building Better Leaders, and the host of the Change Maker podcast. As a founding partner of Starts With Us, a newly established national nonprofit, Deke creates a movement to foster daily habits of curiosity, compassion, and courage to overcome the polarization, blind tribalism, and dehumanization threatening the social fabric of our communities. Among many other awards and honors, Deke has on 7 occasions been recognized as one of Georgia Trend magazine's 100 Most Influential Georgians. He has also completed 5 Ironman competitions and lives in Augusta with his wife, Melissa, and their 2 dogs, Minnie and Haas. Welcome, Deke, to the Voice of Leadership and to Dr. Karen Speaks Leadership.
Dr. Karen, thank you so much for having me. This is an honor.
Well, it's a true delight and honor to have you here. And what a time for you to be here with so much going on in the world. And so I definitely want to hear from you and hear your experiences and also your advice and counsel going forward in many areas as well. So I'm going to start, Deke, with asking you about your time as mayor. What was happening in Augusta when you decided to run for mayor, and what really prompted you to run for the office?
Well, I appreciate that question. So I'm sort of a student of, urban economics. And so when I ran for office, Augusta had its population was shrinking, the tax base was shrinking. So I knew, if that's extrapolated over time for cities, it's never a good result. But also, I was in a program called Leadership Georgia, It's the oldest statewide leadership program in the nation. So you travel throughout the state and you see what communities are doing good, what challenges they're having. So my graduation weekend in November of 2005 here in Augusta, and we traveling the state, we had a very bad reputation for divisive politics. So that week, we had our third current or former elected official go under indictment. And so that was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back for me.
And how did that actually motivate you to run for office when this person was coming under some kind of charges?
Well, I just felt like we needed honest, ethical, inclusive leadership. And my father was a CEO, very ethical CEO. He raised me to serve with a sense of honor and integrity, and really, that's the way my dad raised me. But I just looking at what we had within our local government and the corruption, the indictments were of people that were black, white, male, female, Democrat, and Republican. So it was not like it was any one, but I thought this we needed intervention. We need new leadership.
Okay, so it was really presented an opportunity for you. So let me ask this. I know that you didn't get a lot of encouragement from the more established local politicians. So what was the reason for them discouraging you, and how did you overcome the objections?
Well, it's interesting. So I was 37. I'd grown up in Augusta, but lived elsewhere and moved back. So when I said I was going to run for mayor, I didn't know that I was supposed to go kiss somebody's ring, that's typically the way it works. So I was called in a back room. It was not smoky, but by business leaders that I know and still respect today. But they said, "You're too young. You haven't paid your dues, and no black people will vote for you. No older people will vote for you, and no younger people will vote for you because younger people don't vote." And my response was, "Yeah, I've run a small business. I've run a nonprofit. I've chaired boards of directors. I've had all the leadership experience that I need. What's the difference between that and being mayor?" But still, they felt like they wanted to support a candidate that had quote unquote paid his dues.
That's really funny. As you're sort of recounting this, it reminds me of David when he decided to fight Goliath. And he basically said, I fought the lions and the bears and watching over the flock. And this uncircumcised Philistine is going to be like one of them to me. He just felt like he already had gained the experience he needed, at least to do that job. And that's in essence what you're saying is, I've already done some significant work. I feel that I'm ready and I'm prepared to get out there, is what I hear you talking about.
I still speak to young people all the time, and I say that leadership does not know an age. And you getting into biblical, look at the average age of the apostles. They were very young. I mean, obviously Jesus was in his early 30s, but just because you're a certain age does not qualify you for leadership, or because if you're a certain age on the young side does not disqualify you.
Absolutely. And I know one of the things that they said and were concerned about is that it might be difficult for you to get the Black vote. However, you had a little bit of help from James Brown, the
Yeah.
godfather of soul. And I wanted to find out, how did he support your campaign?
It's so great. I met him my first year in office, but he said, "I know your people. You're so new. You're so now. This city's never going to hold you." And so, my second year in office, we were talking when I was coming home, and we're talking about religion, politics. And he said, "Man, Deke, you're just like a Kennedy. Black people love you." And I'm like, "That is the coolest thing anybody has ever said to me." But so I ran to fill an unexpired term in '05 and had to run again in '06. So we had the rededication of our local arena in his name. After I'd won the first year, they said I'd crossed over, but it was like older people, particularly black folks, would come up to me and say, "I voted for you." Like they couldn't come out and say it. But he got up at that event to name the arena in his honor, and he said, "This is the best mayor we've ever had," and all this stuff. And so his blessing made it okay for people in the black community in Augusta to come out and support me and be verbal about it. That never would have happened, I don't think, without the blessing of the Godfather of Soul.
Well, that's quite a special interest story as far as I'm concerned. Of course, anybody in the Black community definitely knows who James Brown is, and everybody else should know too, because he's
Yes.
quite a music icon and he's from Georgia. So this is all perfect. It fits right in. So I know you must have really been doing some right things in order to be a candidate that could appeal to a vast, diverse group of people. And I know that part of it is positive leadership, and many people don't even believe that positive leadership works. So tell us about how you applied positive leadership principles in your role as mayor and why did it work?
Well, I'll tell you, part of the reason why I ran is because I think oftentimes people in leadership positions, it's dangerous to become siloed or get into echo chambers. So I've been out there running the nonprofit that I ran, a land conservation organization, for 4 years, interacting at the grassroots level with people throughout the community and making those connections and really building trust. For me, it just that grassroots engagement was key, but I always tell people, I'm like, the only power that good leaders should concern themselves with is the power to inspire. And you don't inspire through negative leadership, but no one individual can do anything alone. But if you can inspire people to work with you and with each other, there's nothing you can't do collectively.
Absolutely. So this whole thing about positive leadership is about inspiring people, and it's about being at the grassroots level where you're not just in, as you call it, the echo chamber, speaking to your own voice, so to speak, but you're
Yes.
reaching out to a variety of people. When you became mayor, one of the things you did is you had a prayer breakfast, and you are a man of Christian faith. Tell us about that prayer breakfast you had on the first day of office and why a prayer breakfast?
Well, I just believe it's the right thing to do to bring people together, from all walks of life to pray for our community. So we started that the Monday morning that I was sworn in December of 2005. 19 years later, it is still going strong. We had one this week because it's brought people from all walks of life from throughout the community. People have developed bonds of friendship, people from upper income, lower income areas, different faiths, but it's really contributed to building a stronger fabric for our community. But it's interesting, when I first announced it, people say, oh, it's a political stunt. And I'm like, okay, well, 19 years later, I'm 10 years out of office and we're still doing it. But it was never about me. It was about bringing people of faith together to pray and to fellowship too.
Yeah, that's very interesting because a lot of people would say that a prayer breakfast might be divisive because people have different faiths and might not have the exact same beliefs and so on. So, how did you make it an event that actually unified people and brought them together as opposed to dividing them more?
you know, we basically it's open to everybody. We've been to churches and places of worship throughout the community. Augusta's got a lot of churches and places of worship, so we've never run out in almost 20 years. We basically set the tone at the beginning saying we respect everybody's faith tradition in whatever way you want to pray. But so we just approach it from mutual respect and just that's the tone to begin with. We're not, people have different faith traditions and that's okay. And they pray in different ways, but it's actually a beautiful thing to see people from all different faiths coming together. Somebody asked me one time, if Augusta was a food, what would it be? I said it would be a gumbo because everybody knows a gumbo wouldn't taste any good with only one ingredient. It's that mix of ingredients that makes gumbo so good. And I think that mix of faith traditions, it's interesting and it creates a different flavor.
So, the people who were at the prayer breakfast, were they all Christians or did you have some other faith perspectives?
It's interesting, Dr. Karen, that you should ask that. So we had rabbis attending, we had Muslim folks attending. We had the head of the Muslim community and the rabbi locally. I'll never forget this. In a little Baptist church in South Augusta, we had the imam of the community of faith, the Muslims, and a rabbi sitting together on the front row of a Christian church during Christmas. Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't get a picture of that, but I thought we can all respect each other's faiths and we all focus on God. I'm a Christian, I make no bones about it. And I believe, I mean, I have a passion and a strong belief in my faith, but I don't begrudge people of other faith traditions.
Okay, so this was right from the beginning, the prayer breakfast, and it's still going on even today. How else would you say that your faith made a difference in how you led as mayor?
Well, I will tell you, I would told people throughout my 9 years, I see it said, being mayor is what I do, but my faith is who I am. So in politics, it's oftentimes we'll give that a pass. You know, when people are misled about other candidates or purposely given misinformation, to me, that's bearing false witness. And I would never do that. But I'm like, well, it's okay because it's politics. And I'm like, my faith teaches me that it shouldn't be okay just because it's politics. I mean, telling lies and half truths about other people. And when you see the way that we serve a uniting God, and when you see the way politics are using fear and intimidation to demonize the other side, that's not what my faith is about. I could never do that just to win an election.
And it looks like you won the election anyway without doing it. So,
So exactly, exactly. Yeah, I met Truett Cathy years ago, and I'm sure it's when people have character and they stay true to themselves. So I think you and I discussed. Can you imagine what people told Truett Cathy when he started Chick-fil-A and he said, you know, my faith teaches me I'm not going to open on Sunday. I'm sure people are like, you're going to miss out on the church crowd and your restaurant is built around serving chicken. You're crazy. But he stuck to his convictions and his faith. And look how successful Chick-fil-A is.
absolutely, it's unbelievable. So, what would you say that you've learned, Deke, from the leadership of Jesus himself? We know Jesus was a great leader. What do you take from him specifically?
I think part of leadership or part of just good leadership is challenging the status quo. So, and rebelling. And when you look at, Jesus and some of the religious leaders and everything, and I'm sure people, and we see it when I talk about being at the grassroots level, I don't want to be around just the political elite or whatever. I want to be out with the people. That's what Jesus did. He was around sinners. I mean, he washed people's feet. He was the not a man of the people. He was the man of the people. And I learned that, talk about grassroots engagement to start, I mean, what is now 2000 something years in the future, still going strong. We will all fall short, but he's the greatest example of how to be a servant leader.
Yes, and you mentioned he really kind of bucked against the system. He was a bit of a revolutionary, and it takes courage to go against the grain and the status quo.
It does healing service at my church, and we were talking about that yesterday, talking about Nicodemus going to Jesus in the middle of the night. And did he do that because he didn't want the Sanhedrin to see that he was going to see Jesus? But I said, I think part of it's insecurity. We want to fit in, and if we appear different, we might not fit in. But what I know and what I focus on in my faith is everybody has had some point in their life when they've wanted to fit in, but it's more important. Belonging is what's important. Every day I pray, I'm like, Lord, I know I'm still working on this. We're all works in progress, but I don't need to fit in. I can be different. I can buck the system because I belong to you.
Amen. So, on that note, let me ask this. What was most challenging for you as mayor, and how did you get through that?
The most challenging was something that I didn't necessarily anticipate is that you totally give up your privacy. So in a city of 200,000 people, but as I say, I mean, I was never going to, you know, put myself on a pedestal. And I just made a determination from the beginning. I'm like, I'm going to continue to go to Lowe's on the weekend. I'm going to continue to go to the grocery store. I'm going to continue to go to the Y every morning. So because it'll normalize people seeing me in those settings to where it's not unusual. So that's really how I address that. But it's interesting because you interact at the grassroots level, people would say, well, your job is thankless. I said, no, it's not. Every day I have somebody thank me for doing the job that I do. 10 years out, I'm still getting that because I'm still interacting with regular people. And people appreciate that you don't put on airs. But here again, Jesus was out on the grassroots with the people. He didn't put himself above anybody else.
That's a beautiful lesson and a beautiful picture. And sometimes people forget the celebrity that comes with being in office, just like with movie stars, and you lose your privacy and all of that. So, Dee, what would you say was the most important life lesson that you learned for serving 9 years as mayor?
To never give up. I've often said that unless somebody tells you you're crazy to try to do something, you're not really leading right. But so I was told to begin with, why would you want to get involved in all that? You're never going to make a difference. Our government's dysfunctional, you know, and I just politely listened and went ahead and did it anyway. So to never give up, and in any leadership position, and CEOs, you're going to have your critics and your cynics. That's just part of the deal. But I had a minister tell me one time, he said, basically, critics are like a dog chasing your car, right? What do you do when a dog chases your car? You can keep on driving. He said, if your heart is pure and your hands are clean, just keep on driving.
Oh, I love that. Don't give up and keep on driving. That's phenomenal. And you know what? And you end up getting to the place where you want to be in spite of what they said. Have sort of a ray of hope about what you're doing, no matter how much water people try to douse on it, so to speak.
No, no, and that's too, but I think that's grassroots engagement too, because I would tell people as long as I'm out there with the people, when I'm sitting in the steam room at the Y in the morning on the same level as a bunch of sweaty guys, politics inevitably comes up and people will shoot you straight. So, even if the press is criticizing you on an issue, if you're still at the same time interacting with the people and they're supportive of you, maybe that entity has a problem with me, but the people on the street don't.
And that's great. So it's really also having some broader sources of information and interaction to really know what's really going on. Because sometimes what's reported in the news is also politically motivated and it might not be true.
It is, but you can't let the vocal minority drive the debate in any organization, as a CEO or as a mayor. But it's interesting, and this is kind of not interacting at the grassroots level. I would have commissioners. We had 10 sitting commissioners, my elected counterparts, and they would say, "Oh, my phone's blowing up on this issue." I'd say, "Well, how many calls did you get?" I got 15 calls. I'm like, "Well, last time I checked, our city is 200,000 people. And so you're going to let 15 angry people influence you into making a decision that's not in the best interest of the majority of the people you serve." But that I saw that happen a lot.
Yeah, and so it really is important to recognize, as you say, sometimes there's a vocal minority, and you don't want to make all of your decisions based on that.
No, not at all. And that's if you're insular or siloed, I would see elected officials say, well, they would consider it prevailing public opinion. But I would say in political campaigns, you see these big rallies. Well, how many people are really there as compared to the overall population of the United States? So it gives the appearance that this candidate is pretty much staged, but it gives the appearance that there's this overwhelming support, but, maybe there is, maybe there isn't.
Yeah, you have to do a little bit more work to find out.
Yes.
So let's shift gears a little bit. We've been talking about your time as mayor, and I'd like to ask you now about the nonprofit organization that you also co-founded called Starts With Us. Who do you serve in that nonprofit, and how do you serve them?
I became a founding partner. We're now called Movement Partners 2 years ago. So Daniel Lebetsky, the founder of Kind Snacks, also founded Starts With Us. And so it's moving using, people committing to curiosity, compassion, and courage. It starts with us, the way we treat other people. And if we can all commit to doing that, but it's funny, the original founders went to the mainstream media and said, this is what we're going to try to do. We're going to try to basically heal the nation and bring people back together. And some of the people in the mainstream media said, we don't think Americans are concerned with curiosity, compassion, and courage. So flash forward 2.5 years, last I checked, we had over 2 million connections across all social media platforms. Citizen Solutions is a program we're doing. We started in Tennessee, where around gun control, got together 12 or 11 people on either side of the gun control issue in Tennessee and put them together to see if they could come up with some recommendations of what could be done. They were diametrically opposed and they were able to do that. And if you get down to the grassroots level, the people, if you get them together, can come up with the solutions. And I think that's where, you know, policymakers and politicians should be listening to the people, because maybe we've gotten away from it a little bit, but I believe in public service, and I'm naive, and I thought, okay, when I was a public servant, I was there to serve the public, not a political party, not a special interest group, but the public. And maybe that seems too simplistic, but I hope we can get back to that. And I think it starts with us is really making progress in doing that.
Well, you mentioned those three C's, the curiosity, the compassion, and courage. And particularly, you were talking about gun control. Give us just a little snippet or picture of how you used those three when you brought the people together. How did they use those disciplines to get to a better place?
If you have that at the forefront of your mind, you know, if that's the ground rule and the tone setting in, that we're not here to argue, we're not here to debate, we're here to have a conversation. And I think that when you set those ground rules, you know, it's back to the prayer breakfast. We said at the beginning, as I said, you know, you can pray in your own faith tradition, but we're not here to preach. We're not here to politic. You know, these are the ground rules that we're going into this. But I think if people know those things, you know, that certainly helps a conversation, as opposed to you say something, I jump on you and tell you you're wrong. If we can just use the three C's and just listen to each other, you know, progress can be made.
I think that word listen is really important. So now let me ask you about something that happened relatively recently. I'll call it the name calling conflict during the House Oversight Committee meeting between Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Republican from Georgia, and Jasmine Crockett, a Democrat from Texas. How does this incident illustrate the problems in today's political climate? And what counsel would you give the House Oversight Committee to
Yeah.
recover from this incident?
When my governing body would act like that, I would always remind them that children are watching and that they need to remember that. So Bridge USA is another bridging organization that's national that brings together students on campuses of different political ideologies to have discussions and conversations. But they did a post about that on Instagram the other day. And I said, you know, when we teach our children to treat people with dignity and respect, you know, to be kind, to be compassionate, they're watching this on the news. What message does that send? Maybe we should put some of these politicians who act like this in timeout, or show these videos to first graders and get their point of view of what does that look like to you?
It's really interesting to have the notion that, just to remember that children are watching. So now, what can the chair of the committee do now that this has already occurred? If you were in his seat, how would you respond now?
If I was in his seat, I had to get control of those situations a lot. When the majority of people are acting like that, who has the moral high ground? So if you have a chairman that is committed to being a leader and a diplomat that has not, then you maintain the moral high ground to say, look, you're acting like children. You know, is this something that you're proud of? If you have children, do you want your kids to watch this or your kids' friends? But you've got to maintain that moral high ground, you know, but you're never going to be able to get out of that situation if you're just part of the issue too. And people can say, well, remember last week when you did the same thing? Maybe it wasn't televised for an hour, but if you want to see better behavior in any sector, you have to model it.
I think that's really a good point. And so, yeah, modeling the behavior you want to see yourself
Exactly.
is extremely important. And if you don't, then when other people go even beyond where you would go, what are you going to say? You know?
Exactly. And that's just sad. But I mean, what I tried to focus on. So I would have people say, why don't you just go off on your elected colleagues? I said, look, my dad raised me to be a professional, and I don't care. I'm not going to act like a politician just to be what you think a politician ought to be or to win votes or win an election. I'm going to behave in a professional manner because that's the way my dad raised me.
Absolutely. So let me ask this. And I know that in your consulting and your coaching work with your company, Copenhaver Consulting, that you work with a variety of leaders, not just people in politics. And what's the greatest challenge that people are facing today in leadership position? And even talk about what's common or different between government, corporate, or nonprofit leaders.
No, I'll tell you what I think one of the biggest issues is definitely social media. When you're in a leadership position, we give everybody a megaphone. But if somebody doesn't like what you're doing in leadership, there is nothing stopping them from getting on Facebook or whatever, Instagram, X or whatever it's called now, and just going off. And it could be, that they're spouting out things that are untrue. The perception's wrong, but it's just once that's out of the bottle, what do you do as a leader? They've undermined your ability to lead. So I think people just not acting right and not being civil, it does make it difficult to lead. But I would also say that you've got to keep the perspective. It goes back to keep on driving. I would suggest to leaders, when you see that, don't engage. I had a local, that engaging is the worst thing because it just exacerbates the problem. But I had a local conservative talk show host that on certain issues would just take me to task, and I never called and engaged him. And people said, why don't you call and engage him? I said, because that's what he wants. He wants ratings. And I said, and so I'm not going to do that. And I said, at that point, I said, and I've got more Twitter followers than he does listeners on your average day. So I can get to a broader based audience, but I'm just serving his purposes if I just get mad and engage.
It's interesting you should say that because I'm certain that there are times when we should do exactly what you said, not engage at all. And recently I was listening to a radio show host, a Christian radio show host, and he was talking to Philip Yancey, and they were talking about God's grace and the book and those kind of principles. And what this show host had gone through was someone had said some really nasty things about him, but it was people he knew. He knew
Yeah.
these people, and they were maligning him in the press about how he may have handled something. So he attempted to take it offline because he had their phone numbers. He could text them, he could call them, he could reach them by email or whatever, and they refused to talk privately and continue to talk in the public arena. And I think that's one of the things I see right now that is so toxic in our world is people are willing to throw stones at people who they know in public and they won't. It's kind of like do a Matthew 18 kind of thing and go to the person in private, have the necessary conversation and truly resolve the issue. So what do you think about all of that?
I mean, that is what our faith teaches us to do. I firmly believe in it. And I always told me, and I still do, that it takes much more strength to hold your tongue with patience than to release your tongue in anger. So I had all these great minister influences in my life, but I was on a church leadership retreat, and a pastor said, I remember when I was in high school and I came home and I'd been in a fight at school. And I told my mom, there wouldn't have been a fight if he hadn't hit me. She said, no, there wouldn't have been a fight if you hadn't hit him back. I had a situation where, I just got done running my first political campaign, contracting to, but our mayor's wife and I were at a campaign forum. The opponent got up and said all sorts of lies about the mayor, and his wife is a dear friend of mine. And then the group would not let me speak. And she was getting fired up. And I'm like, no, just, sit back and see. I mean, it was all she could do not to explode. But I said, sometimes you just need to let those people do what they're going to do because they show themselves for who they truly are. And once again, they want you to engage them. They want you to get angry. And I am super competitive. And when I knew that when I was in office or even now, I will not let people manipulate me and give them what they want. If they just want attention and they want to be able to stir it up and continue the argument, yeah, I'd prefer to stick to my competitive nature and say no and just smile and wink at them and walk on.
You know, that is really such a profound notion. The whole idea that we control our own agency. We don't have to be baited into anything, and being slow to speak is actually a virtue in many ways. And so thank you for sharing that, because sometimes we have ill-defined silence as capitulation or as, not caring or a whole lot of other things, when in fact, it can be the epitome of strength under fire.
It really can, Dr. Karen, I'll tell you. And we go back to listening. I've shared with so many people that when I was in office, there were so many constituents, and I took everybody's call. I was just totally, transparent and just open door policy. But there were so many times when I would just sit and listen, and I would listen and I wouldn't try to interject, and the people would talk themselves through their own issue. But I will tell you, I kind of learned that from my wife because early on in our marriage, we were having an issue with something or she was. And so she was telling me about it. And so I'm a guy. So naturally, I'm trying to fix the problem. And she said, I don't want you to fix my problem. I just want you to listen. And that really stuck with me. But putting that into practice in office, sometimes people just want to be listened to.
Yeah, and a lot of times I would say that the wisdom really is in the community if you allow them to have the conversation that needs to be had. And the way you were talking about the three C's, so to speak, you come to it eventually if you create the space for it. And sometimes we forget that. We don't always do it.
I'll tell you a quick story. So I was born in Montreal, Canada, moved to Augusta when I was 4 year old, painfully shy with a thick Canadian accent. I knew what it was like to feel like an outsider. But what that made me do is the more I could learn about music, sports, different places in the world, that was sort of a defense mechanism to where I could talk to anybody about most anything because I had some knowledge. But that also gave me such curiosity that I carry through to this day that I don't want to know just what people think. I want to go deeper and say, well, why do you think that way? We're all socialized differently. Doesn't make us bad or wrong, but we need to realize that going in. Listening is key.
Listening and listening to a variety of people, including those you may not agree with, because they do have a perspective according to their socialization. And sometimes we won't understand it until we take the time to really listen and want to know why they see it the way that they see it. I live that way as well. And I think even living abroad and traveling abroad and seeing people in many places, it can heighten the curiosity component and to understand that people are different and they come from different points of view. And it's valuable to find out what those are.
It really is. I've said the problems in the world don't stem from the people at the grassroots level. They stem from people in purported leadership positions. But I had a situation a number of years ago where I had worked our local fair, I'm part of the Exchange Club, but I Ubered home. So my Uber driver was from Iran. And I said, his wife was in medical school here. I said, what are things like in Iran? He said, oh my gosh, our politics are terrible. And I'm like, hey, I kind of hear that here in the States a little bit too. We had the greatest conversation for 20 minutes. And I got out and I said, you know what? It's so nice to know that a Christian from Augusta, Georgia, and a Muslim from Iran can spend 20 minutes in a car talking to each other and find out we have more in common than we have in difference.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that we can find common ground with almost anyone
We
if
can.
we look and if we are willing to see it and to engage people. And I've certainly had lots of conversations like the one that you're describing as well. So let's talk about maybe a picture or an example where people are real different. And this is going to be, we're right now at the time of this recording, we're in the middle of the presidential election campaign. And this has been a kind of a contentious campaign, is what I would say. And so, how can both candidates at this point model effective leadership in the middle of what's been going on? And how should they approach the upcoming debates? What would you recommend?
It's difficult because I had a conversation with the former CEO of Starbucks, but I said, "What do you do?" This was with the mastermind group I'm a part of. The fruits of the spirit, humility, everything. I mean, the traits of a servant leader, compassion, kindness, all this. This world, and particularly politics, portrays those as weakness, and they're just not. But I think that humility in politics, if it ever was there, is gone. But I don't think I mean, unfortunately, in the presidential race, I don't see either of them saying, you know what, he's got a point on that. It's just we're so far to the point of it's so focused around demonizing each other. But we did a study that starts with us a number of years ago. So 87% of Americans are tired of the hyperpolarization. They call them the 87, the exhausted 87%, which I would agree. I think here again, a lot of people in politics are in those echo chambers and they're not out with the people. I mean, the people want to see our political leaders work together and problem solve. That's what we want. But how much interaction do they actually have with your average man or woman on the street? They're not there. And when I spoke at the National Governors Association recently, I said, look, I get that it's hard for you guys to do grassroots interaction because there are safety concerns, right? But rather than listening to, your political strategists, if you would make an effort to listen to people that are part of organizations like Starts With Us, or Bridge USA, that are out there interacting at the grassroots level, that can really tell you what the American people want to see. But unfortunately, it's almost like, well, if we go to the middle, you know, we're not going to get out the base that are extremists. I pray every day for all our political leaders. I pray for President Biden and his administration. I pray for former President Trump and his campaign. But my prayer every day is open their eyes and touch their hearts. I can't do that, but God can do anything he wants. We haven't even touched on it. I survived cancer last year with no side effects from treatment. I am a walking miracle. So I am living proof. I am a testimony to God's grace and the power of prayer. If he intends to change these things, he's going to do it. I have I have no doubt whatsoever, but it's in his hands.
It's in his hands. And what I love is that you're talking about there are other ways to get the grassroots information, even if you can't go there personally yourself,
Exactly.
at least be affiliated with the groups of people that are in touch and try to find ways that you can agree with people rather than not in a sense, or to see something good even on the other side of the aisle.
So there are 500 active bridging organizations in the US doing amazing work. So at the National Governors Association, where I spoke last fall, so they have a program called Disagree Better, where they get Republican and Democrats together and they're kind of lighthearted and say, we don't agree on everything, but we agree that we need to work together across party lines to solve the nation's problems. At that event in New Hampshire, there were probably 500 people from all over the United States, all different political parties, all different walks of life. And I thought, good gosh, this is what America wants to see. But then with the situation with the Speaker of the House, that debacle last fall, there was one candidate who was a Republican that for the Speaker of the House, he didn't get it. But somebody said, well, can you form a coalition government? He said, nobody wants to see that. Well, Dartmouth had done a study in conjunction with Starts With Us and other groups. 72% of Americans want to see the two sides working together to solve problems. So I'm sitting there thinking, well, you say maybe nobody in your party or sitting in the room with you wants to see that, but 72% of Americans do.
Absolutely, they do. I'm one of them, as a matter of fact.
Me too.
Deke, you started to mention a few minutes ago about your illness, and I did want to ask you about that.
Absolutely.
Tell us briefly what you went through and what were some of the leadership lessons that you learned from going through a serious illness?
So I was diagnosed with esophageal cancer April 19th of 2023, but fortunately I was in very good shape. So they got very aggressive with the treatments, 5.5 weeks of 5 times a week radiation, 1 time a week chemo. I never had a side effect. But I'll tell you a good leadership lesson. I went down to MD Anderson in July, nothing there. Went back in October, nothing there. Back in January, still fine. Going back this week, as a matter of fact. But God gave me a spirit of peace and calm, which when I was getting chemotherapy, you're in a room full of people, and I'm like, okay, this is my team, and my job is to keep them lifted up and their spirits lifted up. So it was like God giving me a ministry, but dropping me in the middle of them. And I'm like, that's my job is to lead these people and help shepherd them through this because it's scary. And I thought, God giving me a spirit of peace and calm. But my wife is like, you're crazy. I'm like, I love going through chemotherapy because it goes back to the grassroots interaction. You talk about people knew that I was formerly mayor. And nobody really talked politics because you're all in this shared experience of we're all going through cancer together. And there's a sense of solidarity, but that was a great leadership lesson for me. I'm like, make the most of any position you're given, I mean, whether it's good or bad, but realize that you can lead in any situation. And that was one of the most fulfilling things. I still go through monthly immunotherapy, but just to be able to lift people's spirits. My wife gets, every time I get through immunotherapy, she gets Chick-fil-A biscuits for everybody, all the patients. She is the most well-loved lady, but she just hands them out to everybody. And here again, it's people from all walks of life. It can be a beautiful thing.
You know, what I love about what you're saying is that you didn't get insular and just focus on yourself. You were still reaching out to make a difference in other people's lives and to uplift them and to encourage them and recognizing that you were all in it together. It didn't matter whether you had been the mayor before or anything. This was a shared experience. Again, grassroots with the people. To me, that's very profound what you just said. And it's all a matter of how we choose to live.
Well, I will tell you a story, a quick story for your viewers and listeners. So I have always said leading through love and compassion is sustainable. Leading through fear and intimidation is not, because somebody's going to want to knock you off the pedestal. So last year, 9 years out of office, as soon as I was diagnosed, my former executive assistant is chief of staff at the Georgia Cancer Center. So I went to him and said, what can we do proactive? I've got all these platforms. What can we do to help? He said, the cancer walk is coming up in 3 weeks. Why don't you form a team? So we did. It was my wife and my family and friends. So we set as a goal to raise $10,000. In 3 weeks, we raised $53,000. The goal of the Cancer Center was 75. They raised 115. But the sea of goodwill I had spent creating in 9 years was still there. I mean, the community rallied around our team, but around the whole walk in general. And the thing to me is, so the Cancer Center treats people. I can afford really good cancer care, but there are a lot of people who can't. So they provide world-class care to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it. So knowing what those monies went to do, to help people that weren't in as good of a position to get excellent care as me, that was affirmation from God that he meant for me to have cancer. He meant for me to go through this. And I still pray that he'll use all the blessings and grace that he bestowed upon me through this, use me as a vessel, magnify, amplify, sanctify, multiply, and glorify all the grace and all the blessings, and let me share them abundantly with others.
What a well said statement about really the purpose of your life and what can be the purpose for all of our lives to do exactly what you just described. I know our time is winding up. I feel like I could talk to you forever. So let me
Me,
ask.
me too. Me too.
I mean, this is such an important conversation, and especially at this time, in our world history and in our nation's history as well. And I know that you've written the book Change Maker, The Art of Building Better Leaders. I know that we've been talking about many of the concepts in that book. What are some of the other key leadership principles that maybe we haven't mentioned yet? And who is this book for? Who should get it?
I think everybody should get it. It is about leadership. Some people think that I'm a former politician. It's about politics. It's not. So somebody asked me, what's at the core of your book? I said, it's that you can treat everybody with dignity and respect and maintain your character and your composure and your integrity and be successful in leadership positions, even in politics. And the guy said, I don't think that's possible in politics. I said, no, it is. But I think a big part, as we said, curiosity, compassion, but the courage to take the leap of faith to challenge the status quo, because that's part of, we have to constantly challenge the status quo. And that's not an easy thing because you're putting yourself out there. And, not everybody wants to be a target. And if you try to change things and challenge the status quo, you're putting a target on your back. But positive change is never going to come without that corporately, politically, or in any other way.
Absolutely. And so when we talk about something difficult and that's challenging, let me throw this out. Right now, we've got a lot of conflict in the Middle East, and particularly what's going on in Israel and with the Palestinian people and so on. When you think about all of these principles, what is something you might advise so far as walking through that situation in a way that shows dignity and respect and hope?
That is so difficult. Well, so Daniel Lebetsky, the founder of Kind Snacks and Starts With Us, 20 years ago started a nonprofit in the Middle East called the One Voice Movement to bring moderate Palestinians and Israelis together. In 20 years, he got 650,000 people, Palestinians and Israelis, on board with that. And then October 7th happened. So it's so hard. I think that's more about the leadership too. I mean, it's rank and file. The grassroots don't fight wars and they don't start wars. I don't know what to do in that situation other than pray. I pray every single day. I pray for the Ukraine and Russia. And I'm like, Lord, you are from everlasting to everlasting. You are both Alpha and Omega. You're beginning and end. You're bigger than any war. You are bigger than any political party. And I'm but a speck of dust and a grain of sand. But if there's any way you can use me, just tell me what you need me to know.
I think that that's really very powerful because, sometimes we say, I don't know anything else to do but prayer as if it's minor, but prayer is huge.
It is huge.
And when we are praying, God is moving things around in the heavenlies and all things are shifting and we don't even know how what's going to end up. And I feel hope even knowing that someone had started an organization that was successful for 20 years. And so we can get back to it as well. In other words, it's been done.
Yeah.
Somebody was doing it. There's no reason why it can't continue. So that's an important thing. We can pray for that.
We can, but Bridge USA, so I mentor their CEO, Manu Meal. So he told me that they have had since October 7th on college campuses, they have had more substantive talks between Jewish folks and Muslims than they've ever had. He said, but all you see in the media are the protests. But he said, we've been building trust between different students for years and years. So because that trust was there, we can have those conversations. And I just wish
That.
sometimes that doesn't fit the media narrative, but stuff like that and the one voice movement, I kind of want to know, as I think you do, that at least somebody's there trying.
Exactly. And we can certainly encourage and support those who are doing great work on the ground and at the grassroots level. So let me ask this. You have had a lot of experience over the years in your professional life and your personal life. Looking back over all those years, what advice would you give to yourself back at the beginning when you were first starting your leadership journey? What would you tell yourself now that you know more?
I would say be patient because I think when you're young, you expect things to happen overnight. I just cheered this campaign to get our mayor a full and equal vote in our local government. Our charter to consolidate our local government was established 28 years ago. If at 37, when I first ran for mayor, I did not ever expect to be 19 years later a 56-year-old campaign survivor working on the same thing, but we got that done. And so these things change takes time. I mean, it really is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So you need to commit to the long haul.
Wonderful. So be patient, commit to the long haul. So, how can people reach you? You are a public speaker, you're a consultant, you have your book, The Change Maker. How can they reach you? How can they get the book?
They can find me at Deke-Copenhaver, Copenhaver, .com. That's my website. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn at Deke Copenhaver on both of those. Don't do Facebook as much. But I'll tell you, Dr. Karen, the benefit to me is I think I'm the only Deke Copenhaver I know of in the world, which is great when you're doing good things. When I was growing up and was not doing all good things, it was an easy name to remember, but just Google me. You can find me.
Okay, wonderful. So you heard it from Deke himself. He's easy to find. And so look him up through his website and get in touch if you'd like to engage him as a public speaker, as a consultant, and to get his book wherever great books are sold. You can do that as well. So, Deke, as we're closing up today, you've given a lot of words of wisdom as far as moving forward. What additional words of wisdom do you want to share with my community of corporate executive business leaders?
Well, to me, and this is kind of a simple thing, but the Lord commands us to love our neighbors as ourselves. That's not always easy. It's not always easy with difficult employees, but that is a command. It's not a request. So sort of focus on loving people, and good things come from there.
Well, praise the Lord on that. Focus on loving people and good things coming. That is the truth. So thank you so much, Deke, for being here with me today on the show. I really appreciate everything you had to say, and I know people will benefit as a result.
Well, thank you. And I've got two corgis starting to bark in the background, but fortunately we're at the end. But thank you. You are a blessing to know. And this has just been wonderful. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely. And stay tuned because I'm getting ready to close us out with a few Bible verses. So this is Ephesians 4. I'm going to start with verse 29. Yes. Let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice, and be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave you. I think we've heard from my guest today, Deke Copenhaver, that a kind, decent word is what we need in today's world. So go forth with that and have a great day and bless someone else. Hi, this is Dr. Karen Wilson Starks, and today I'm with Pastor Ben Anderson, the Executive Director of the Solid Rock Community Development Corporation. They're doing great work in Southeast Colorado Springs, and today he's going to talk about what they're doing to ensure generational wealth in the community.
Thank you, Dr. Kern. We have purchased commercial property, and the objective is to create generational wealth in families. This property is a tool where residents can invest in the property and then they receive the dividends from it. The dividends are the lease payments that businesses operate in that commercial property. Those dividends can then be passed along to their family, their children, and this is how we create wealth in our communities through property ownership, through commercial ownership, through land ownership. And so we have impacting families in Southeast Colorado Springs.
Thank you so much, Pastor Ben, for what you and your organization are doing to ensure that families thrive for the long haul in multiple generations. And it's also a passive income stream. Isn't that phenomenal? So, you out there listening today, if you'd like to contribute to this great effort, please go to solidrockcdc.com. That's solidrockcdc.com. Thank you for listening to The Voice of Leadership with me, Dr. Karen Wilson Starks. I am also your concierge executive leadership advisor for when you need to make tough business decisions, lead change, create a positive and profitable company culture, develop an enterprise-focused executive team, or prepare for leadership transition and succession. Contact me at Karen, Karen, at transleadership.com. Also go to my website, www.transleadership.com, for more leadership resources. I want to give special thanks to Ron McMillan, gospel jazz saxophonist, National Billboard recording artist, also known as Mr. Sirius XM, for allowing us to use his gifted music on our show, and to Chad Barr of the Chad Barr Group for serving as our show producer. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.